Suns. Now, we're going to shift on to a little bit of news, but still pertinent to what we're talking about. I want to go back to the Phoenix Suns and how Deandre Ayton appears to not be a part of their long-term future. Oh, god damn it. Way long ago, I did a video, I was doing the podcast and I turned it into a YouTube video. I talked about Deandre Ayton and him not getting his extension, which I thought at the time, and still do actually, I thought that was absolutely preposterous. Like, very clearly, Deandre Ayton contributes to winning basketball. I mean, you can look at this season all you want and be like, oh yeah, he shouldn't be maxed, but are we just going to erase everything he did last year, helping Phoenix get to the finals? It sucks that they went out like this, but to use this and be like, oh, well, Deandre Ayton doesn't deserve a max contract because of this, it's just like, it's being dumb. It's being dumb. And this argument came to us courtesy of the very handsome JJ Redick and the not so handsome Patrick Beverley. Is there a video of it? There's not, so unfortunately I have to read it, which sucks. The retired player and Timberwolves veteran were on First Take Monday with Stephen A. and Molly Karam debating Ayton following Phoenix's embarrassing loss. Redick says, quote, Ayton's fantastic. And then Beverly responds quickly, whoa, he's okay. Again, I think that Patrick Beverley is just locked in shit talker mode because he is still an active player. So especially someone like Patrick Beverley, whose entire brand is being like the annoying shit talker that everyone knows is irritating, compared to JJ Redick, who's now in the media arc of his anime and is much less concerned about like holding up his brand as a player. Redick responds, there's a reason they didn't max him, Stephen A. There's a reason they didn't max him. It has nothing to do with playoff performance. He was good in the playoffs last year. The reason they didn't max him was because there's questions about his attitude and character. Boom. There you go. Smith's argument was that Ayton's 5-point performance has implications that go beyond the game. Moments like yesterday matter because people who cut checks look for an excuse not to give it to you. Even if they're wrong, they look for an excuse not to give it to you, and it's important you provide it to them when a Game 7 arrives. That's an important moment. It dictates a lot. And if you're DeAndre Ayton, they're going to remember that. Now, I feel that this is kind of a moot point because they didn't max him in the beginning of the season when there was no Game 7 played. I think that regardless of character issues, I'm not one to mention players' character issues because I don't know. We don't know. Phoenix is just an organization that is still trying to not suck. And I say not suck mainly in regards to ownership because, of course, Robert Sarver had that whole racism thing, the whole racism suit, the toxic workplace suit. And if I recall correctly, he was the one who was like, no, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Even though, like, it would make sense to lock up DeAndre Ayton because who's going to replace him? You're not going to find anyone better than him at this point in time. Ayton played only 3 minutes in the second half and never returned after coming out of the game halfway through the third. When asked why he only played 17 minutes in Game 7, Suns coach Monty Williams said, quote, it's internal. Ayton is now a restricted free agent. Redick goes on to say, quote, he's the one guy on your roster that you could facilitate a sign and trade with and potentially bring back a third player, a wing player that can get you buckets, that can guard. They just don't have that third option right now. I don't want to say that JJ Redick is wrong here because he's not. As I've said, in today's NBA, you can either have the 3-star model or the 2-star model. Currently, Phoenix has the 2-star model where they trade in their third star for depth, which they have a considerable amount of. You have Ayton, you have Cam Johnson, you have McCall Bridges, you have Cam Payne, JaVale McGee, Jay Crowder. How much of that are you going to have to give up for this third star that you don't really need? You don't really need that third star. If anything, Phoenix is, kind of shooting themselves in the foot by holding on to Chris Paul. Like, I think that if you're in the market of dealing, your priority should be to deal Chris Paul because Chris Paul is 38 years old, is no longer the player that he once was, and is probably just straight up bad luck, as I already mentioned. He's bringing bad luck onto the rest of the organization. DeAndre Ayton realistically still has a few more years left of development before he peaks as a player. And even him, where he's at right now, you have someone who you can dunk the ball into in the post. He can defend at a moderately decent level. I wouldn't go so far as to say like he's a great defender. I think he's serviceable, but he does bring a lot of utility to this Phoenix Suns team that, let's not forget, went to the finals last year and just won 64 games this season. I get it. We are a reactionary bunch in sports media. Even JJ Redick, someone who is very respected as a media person, by a lot of us brain diseased folk on the internet. Like, we like the refreshing personality that JJ Redick brings. But still, like, to be in media, at least in traditional sports media, you do have to be a little bit of a reactionary Andy. And this talk of, Ayton's character, Ayton not being Ayton not being their third option, that's reactionary. Like, straight up, that's reactionary rhetoric. Rewinding back to Redick's comment, Beverly disputed. Redick said Ayton is fantastic at taking advantage of mismatches and talked about how effective he and Chris Paul are in the pick and roll. Beverly came back and said, quote, any rolling big is going to play well with Paul, and DJ being an example of that. This is just fucking... Patrick Beverly is just straight up... He's just straight up trolling. Deandre Ayton has more utility than DeAndre Jordan did when he was in his prime. Like, DeAndre Jordan is just American Rudy Gobert. I mean, maybe I might be a little bit wrong because Gobert is a superior defender, but, like, on paper, their player profiles are the same. They're one-dimensional bigs on offense who contribute on the glass and on the defensive end. Ayton is not that. Ayton is actually quite literally the exact opposite of DeAndre Jordan and has more of a presence on offense that Rudy Gobert was. Redick later goes on to say, quote, he views himself as a max player, and then you go halves without touching the basketball, and a lot of that has to do with the Dallas defense because, again, they're not operating in drop coverage. He's not getting those little 15-foot floaters. He's not getting the pocket pass with rolls all the way at the rim, and there's a level of frustration. I look at Game 6, he didn't get the ball until the second half. I understand that this is, at times, a player's aggressiveness can be a reflection of them. Like, we look at LeBron in 2011, and that guy was not with it. Passive Andy, not looking to get his shots. But for someone like DeAndre Ayton, how much of that is his fault, and how much of that is the fault of the game plan? Because DeAndre Ayton is not going to have the ball in his hands all the time. He's not Joel Embiid. He's not the focal point of his team's offense. Like, when you're a secondary scorer, you are inherently reliant on your teammates to get you the ball. Like, if he's going halves without touching the ball, why doesn't Monty Williams go to Chris Paul and Devin Booker and be like, hey, find a way. Let's run a set. Let's try to find Ayton around the rim with a lob. Or, get him the ball in the post where he's got 2 feet in the paint. And before the double comes, allow him to get up a little hook shot. Like, I understand giving blame to the player because, listen, nobody was good for the Suns in that Game 7. But, like, to look at a guy like Ayton and then critique him for not getting shots up the same way that we critique Devin Booker and Chris Paul is just, I don't feel it's an apt comparison. In reaction, Beverly said, well, go get it off the rim, 7-footer, because there's a lot of bricks that Devin and Paul was putting up there. Beverly continued by saying he's not interested in hearing about the lack of touches off the pass for Ayton. Quote, I'm all about greatness. What would Wilt Chamberlain do? What would Shaquille O'Neal do? Get it off the rim. Y'all don't have to have him in pick and roll. I'm going to get it off the rim. This is literally, to a T, everything that is good and bad about basketball discourse on the internet. What the fuck, Patrick Beverly, my man, what in the name of Allah, of God, of Jehovah, of Yahweh, whatever you may call your God, what the fuck are you doing mentioning DeAndre Ayton alongside Shaquille O'Neal and Wilt Chamberlain? Oh God, my brain is like, I can feel it just like sizzling and turning to goop because that is such an insane comment to make about DeAndre Ayton. Oh my God. Like, that is literally preposterous. That is like looking at Jay Crowder. What did Jay Crowder shoot? Let's look at this. because this is good. Because no one's talking about Jay Crowder, so I think we can throw a little bit of Jay Crowder slander in there just because everybody, we have to embarrass everyone on this Suns team except Cameron Johnson because Luka already embarrassed him. Jay Crowder gave you 11 points per game that series. Patrick Beverley. Jay Crowder is like 6'6", 6'7". Do you think that he should do what LeBron and Kevin Durant do? No, obviously you don't fucking think that, because that would be insane of you to say. It's insane for me to even think of this comparison. But anyway, getting back to the task at hand. The Suns had no interest in re-signing Deandre Ayton for the max. That is abundantly clear, because they would have done it already. So to sit here and say that he needs to go get the ball off the rim, he's going whole halves without touches, it's his character, it's this, it's that. I'm sure there is some truth. There might be some truth to the character thing. But also, how much of that is a potential like cause and effect where DeAndre Ayton is soured towards the organization because he feels undervalued? And I think that's actually, like, if I remember correctly, that actually came up. DeAndre Ayton, quote, did not feel valued by the Suns, is expected to receive a max. And this is from Woj, guys. This is Woj.
DeAndre Ayton, he did not feel valued by this Phoenix organization. They were not able to come to an agreement on his rookie extension. He saw all the other players in his class, or many of the top players, get extensions. He wanted a max deal. He would not move off that. So now he moves toward restricted free agency this summer, where now he'll have some more options, but ultimately Phoenix can still match an offer out there and keep him if he signs an offer sheet with another team.
You mentioned restricted free agency. What exactly does this summer look like for DeAndre Ayton?
Well, you're going to look at the teams with cap space. A team like, let's say, for example, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, Portland. Teams who could create enough cap space to go out and sign them. But also the discussions of a sign and trade, meaning teams who maybe don't have the cap space. And if Phoenix decides they want to get assets back for DeAndre Ayton, they don't want to match an offer sheet and either decide to pay him that max or allow him to just leave for nothing, which I think is what they won't do. There'll be a lot of conversations around the league. DeAndre Ayton's going to get a max contract in the marketplace somewhere. Phoenix really has to look at their sort of the allocation financially of how they want to distribute salaries, money. That's what this is. You know, the relationship with Monty Williams had been one of the real benefits. I think their ability to work together and build a relationship. It'll be interesting to see how that season ended impacts this. But it's going to be really one of these stories of this offseason, because DeAndre Ayton, there are a lot of teams lining up to figure out how can we acquire him.
Yeah. So, you know, we can talk about DeAndre Ayton being, you know, a shitty person or whatever, having character issues. But, like, that's just conjecture. That's not really, like, that's not tangible. That's not tangible evidence for him to point to for him not getting this extension, because he never got it. If you feel you're a max player and your team doesn't reciprocate that, you're going to be a little bitter. It's natural. You're going to be a little bitter towards the front office. It's like you're giving them 15 and 10 every night, playing respectable defense, being a key piece to your team winning like 120 some odd games over the last 2 years. And then for them to be like, oh yeah, by the way, we have no interest in offering you a max extension, even though we're most likely going to match it in the offseason. It's just silly, man.